Saturn is the planet we instinctively resist the most, yet it is the one that shapes us the deepest. In astrology, Saturn represents challenges, delays, limitations, discipline, fear, responsibility, and long-term effort. Wherever Saturn is placed in a horoscope, it marks the area of life where ease is missing and effort is mandatory. Unlike benefic planets that offer comfort and rewards upfront, Saturn operates through pressure and resistance. It does not ask whether we like its lessons, it simply presents reality and demands that we grow up. A common question people ask is why Saturn always signifies hardship. The better question is why we accept without hesitation that Venus signifies comfort, wealth, and pleasure in every position. Each planet has a fixed nature. Venus softens life, Jupiter expands it, Mars activates it, and Saturn hardens it. Saturn's role is not to make life pleasant, but to make life real. It shows us where we are unprepared, immature, irresponsible, or overly dependent on illusion. Saturn does not create suffering arbitrarily, it exposes weak foundations. Saturn represents the karmic backlog of the soul. The areas where Saturn creates delay are often areas that were misused, taken for granted, or avoided in previous lifetimes. Because of that, Saturn slows things down so that value can be restored. Patience is not Saturn's punishment, impatience is what Saturn corrects. Whatever Saturn governs in a chart arrives late, but when it arrives, it stays. Saturn never denies permanently, but it absolutely refuses to rush. This is why Saturn is considered the planet of justice. Its justice is impersonal and consistent. Saturn treats everyone the same. It does not respond to desire, emotion, or entitlement. It responds only to effort, discipline, and responsibility. If effort is missing, Saturn blocks progress. If effort is sustained over time, Saturn eventually opens the door. This makes Saturn one of the easiest planets to interpret conceptually, even though it is the hardest to experience emotionally. In practical life, Saturn shows where a person must work the longest, face the most resistance, and develop maturity through experience rather than instruction. Saturn's challenges are lifelong, not temporary, because Saturn moves slowly and represents long-term karmic themes. These are not problems that disappear quickly. They are lessons that evolve as the individual evolves. This is why people often feel that life becomes more manageable after their mid-30s. It is not that Saturn becomes softer, it is that the person finally stops fighting Saturn. The maturity age of Saturn is around 36 years. Before this age, Saturn feels harsh, restrictive, and unforgiving because the person is still trying to bypass reality. After this age, something shifts internally. The individual begins to accept limitations instead of resenting them. In many cases, by the time Saturn matures, the person has already put in years of effort, so results begin to show. Saturn does not suddenly give rewards, it simply allows the harvest once the soil has been properly worked. Saturn is also the planet of mastery. If you observe the most successful people in any field, a clear Saturnian pattern emerges. They choose one path and stay with it for decades. They do not chase shortcuts. They repeat the same effort thousands of times until excellence becomes inevitable. This is Saturn's demand: consistency over brilliance, perseverance over talent, endurance over speed. Legends are not born through inspiration alone, they are built through Saturn. Saturn rules authority, structure, systems, law, and hierarchy. It governs institutions, governments, corporations, and social order. On a personal level, Saturn represents authority figures such as bosses and father figures. But more importantly, it represents internal authority, the voice that demands accountability. Saturn does not care about intentions, it cares about execution. Astrologically, Saturn has three aspects, the 3rd, 7th, and 10th from its position. These aspects explain how Saturn operates beyond the house it occupies. The 3rd aspect is about effort and perseverance. Wherever this aspect falls, consistent hard work is required over a long period to gain results. The 7th aspect represents restriction and realism. It limits expectations and forces maturity in dealing with that area. The 10th aspect represents duty and responsibility, areas of life that cannot be avoided forever and must eventually be handled with seriousness. Saturn's dignity modifies intensity but never removes hardship. Saturn is debilitated in Aries, where impatience clashes with Saturn's slow pace, often leading to frustration and humiliation if effort is avoided. Saturn struggles in Leo and Scorpio due to ego and emotional extremes. Saturn performs best in Libra and Aquarius, where balance, fairness, and collective responsibility align with its nature. Even in these signs, Saturn still demands work. It simply rewards it slightly sooner. Retrograde or combust Saturn is not weaker in the long run. In fact, such Saturn placements often become more productive after maturity because internal discipline develops slowly but deeply. These individuals are forced to build strength from within, often without external support. Saturn rules Capricorn and Aquarius, making it the natural governor of career, duty, income, and long-term goals. This is why Saturn is always connected to work and earnings. Life requires structure to function, and Saturn is the architect of that structure. People dislike Saturn because it destroys fantasy, but fantasy cannot sustain life. Saturn insists on reality. Jupiter teaches through encouragement. Saturn teaches through consequence. Jupiter is the teacher who hopes you understand. Saturn is the teacher who tests whether you actually did. Saturn does not just give lessons, it conducts examinations. This is why Saturn feels cruel to those who avoid responsibility and fair to those who accept it. Ultimately, Saturn's purpose is not suffering but strength. It breaks illusions so that real capability can emerge. Happiness is rarely the result of achievement alone. It is the result of overcoming resistance. Saturn creates resistance so that growth becomes real, not imagined. Saturn will always represent delay, discipline, fear, boundaries, and effort. It cannot be softened into a comfort planet. But if approached correctly, Saturn becomes the greatest ally a person can have. It turns ordinary effort into extraordinary endurance. It transforms persistence into legacy. With these contexts in mind, let us delve into the predictions for Saturn in different houses, without considering the influence of signs, nakshatra placements, conjunctions, or aspects. When Saturn occupies your first house, the house that represents yourself, body, personality, and overall life direction, your life often feels weighed down by seriousness and responsibility from an early age. You tend to present yourself to the world in a disciplined, composed way that others may perceive as mature or even intimidating. For you, life is not lived lightly. It feels structured, purposeful, and often serious, even during moments that others treat as casual. Saturn here brings a gravity to your presence that makes people take you seriously, but it also means that your path to expressing your true self is rarely effortless. You may have felt different from others when you were young, as though you carried the world on your shoulders while your peers enjoyed carefree experiences. Childhood may have included experiences that forced you to grow up quickly, instilling a sense of duty and responsibility that others your age did not carry. Early on, you might have developed insecurities or a sense of inferiority, not because you lacked ability, but because you felt unseen or misunderstood. These internal pressures often lead you to work hard to prove your worth, which in turn builds resilience, discipline, and a formidable work ethic. Your personality tends to be earnest, reliable, and deeply loyal. People can quickly learn that when you give your word, you mean it. Your dependability becomes one of your greatest assets because you do not make promises lightly. You carry responsibility seriously, and others often rely on you in times of need. At the same time, this sense of duty can create inner tension. You may struggle to express your true self, your opinions, emotions, or vulnerabilities. Part of this comes from an early belief that showing weakness equals risk, which makes emotional openness feel unsafe. There can be memories or experiences you've tucked away that continue to shape your self-expression and confidence. You prefer to think through risks meticulously before acting, because for you, decisions are serious business. Even small choices can feel laden with consequence. This caution helps you avoid careless mistakes, but it can also trap you in cycles of hesitation when life calls for bold action. Over time, you learn that not all risks lead to failure, but Saturn's energy ensures that you only take them when you feel ready. Health can be a subtle theme with this placement. Early in life, you may have faced periods of low energy, stress-related tension, or physical limitations, especially when pressure mounted. Saturn's influence here shows that your relationship with your body requires disciplined care, consistent routines, balanced rest, and pacing yourself rather than pushing relentlessly. What others manage casually, you experience as a careful balancing act. By developing structured health habits, you gradually build a strong, resilient body capable of withstanding stress over time. Because the first house also describes your outward life path, how life unfolds for you, Saturn here often delays visible success, particularly in your earlier years. Recognition, career progress, and public achievements frequently come later in life, especially after your early 30s. Before then, life feels like an uphill climb with many lessons about persistence, patience, and focus. People with this placement often make the most enduring achievements because what comes after struggle tends to last. Saturn rarely shortcuts your growth, it builds it. Part of your internal journey involves overcoming self-doubt. Early experiences may have filled your mind with questions about self-worth or whether you truly belong. Instead of allowing this to paralyze you, Saturn pushes you toward mastery, the inner belief that you can do difficult things even when they feel heavy. Over time, this transforms into a quiet confidence that does not need external validation. Your social relationships are shaped by this seriousness as well. People may see you as reliable and steady, but also somewhat reserved or distant at first. Because you do not easily open up, friendship and intimacy are not casual for you. They are earned through trust and shared experience. This selective openness is not aloofness, but wisdom. You invest your energy only where you sense depth and trustworthiness. In terms of career, Saturn in the first house often draws you toward paths that reward discipline, structure, and authority. This can include careers in law, government, engineering, technology, administration, or any field that demands careful planning and consistent effort. These are areas where your methodical approach, patience, and maturity become major strengths. You may find that people look to you for leadership, even if you do not seek the spotlight. Saturn's aspects from the first house play a pivotal role in shaping your life events. Its aspect to the third house, which governs siblings, communication, and self-effort, often creates restricted or distant relationships with younger siblings. You may feel that these bonds lack warmth or ease, or that you simply cannot connect with them at a deep level. Saturn's presence here means effort and maturity are required before these connections feel comfortable or meaningful. The aspect on the 7th house significantly impacts partnership and marriage. With Saturn influencing this area, marriage may be delayed until your early 30s or later. This delay is not a curse, but rather a period of growth. It gives you time to mature emotionally so that when partnership does arrive, it carries the seriousness, loyalty, and responsibility that Saturn values. When you do marry, you often choose a partner who is mature, either in age or mindset, and the relationship becomes less about playful romance and more about shared responsibility, stability, and mutual commitment. Saturn's aspect on the 10th house influences career, reputation, and public identity. Success here is typically the result of long-term effort rather than early promise. You may feel that achievement always demands extra work, but this effort builds a solid professional foundation. Many people with this placement become respected professionals in fields that reward longevity and structure, and they find that recognition grows as they age. Emotionally, there may be moments when you feel misunderstood or alone, particularly if others expect you to be more expressive than you feel comfortable being. Learning to articulate your inner world, even imperfectly, becomes an important part of your growth. In many ways, Saturn in the first house shapes a life of earned maturity. You may not find ease where others do, but you build depth where others only skim the surface. Your seriousness is not a burden but a foundation. It gives you endurance, resilience, and a capacity for long-term achievement that many admire. What comes to you in the later stages of life is often the result of the discipline, patience, and inner strength you develop through years of careful effort and self-reflection. When Saturn is placed in your 2nd house, your relationship with money, family, security, and self-worth develops through pressure, responsibility, and gradual maturity rather than ease. From an early age, you may feel that stability is fragile, something that can be lost if you are careless. Because of this, fear often becomes tied to resources, fear of not having enough, fear of losing what you've built, or fear of slipping back into a difficult phase you once experienced. Even when finances improve, the anxiety doesn't disappear immediately. Saturn here teaches you that true security is not created overnight and cannot be rushed. Your upbringing may have played a significant role in shaping this mindset. Many people with this placement grow up in households where money is tightly controlled, emotions are restricted, or discipline outweighs warmth. You may have felt that affection or approval came with conditions. Parents or elders may have been extremely practical or frugal, discouraging indulgence and teaching you early that nothing should be wasted. While this environment can feel emotionally limiting, it also builds awareness of how deeply money affects mental and physical well-being. Because of these early experiences, your self-worth may become entangled with material stability. You may judge yourself harshly during periods of financial struggle, feeling as though lack equals failure. Saturn's deeper lesson here is to separate your value from your bank balance. Over time, life pushes you to build confidence from integrity, effort, and inner discipline rather than income alone. This lesson matures slowly, but once learned, it becomes unshakable. Financially, Saturn in the second house creates delays. No matter how much you earn early in life, saving may feel difficult. Money often flows out as quickly as it comes, usually toward responsibilities rather than pleasure. This can be frustrating, especially when you are working hard and feel you deserve more ease. Saturn is not denying wealth here, it is training you to manage it wisely. After your mid-30s, financial patterns often stabilize significantly. Your relationship with food and consumption can also reflect Saturn's influence. You may have experienced restriction around food in childhood, or developed guilt around indulgence. This can later manifest as extremes, either denial or unhealthy coping habits. Saturn asks for moderation, routine, and respect for the body. When you approach nourishment with structure rather than fear, balance gradually returns. Speech and expression are another sensitive area. The second house governs the mouth, voice, and communication style, and Saturn here can make you cautious or restrained in how you speak. You may struggle with confidence in expressing opinions, especially early in life. Words feel heavy, and you may prefer silence over speaking without certainty. In some cases, this placement can also show speech-related issues or habits such as smoking or alcohol use that develop as coping mechanisms under stress. With maturity, your speech becomes deliberate, authoritative, and meaningful rather than casual. Family dynamics often feel emotionally distant. You may feel unsupported, misunderstood, or obligated rather than nurtured within your family system. Separation from family early in life, emotionally or physically, is common. Even when family members are present, warmth may feel limited. Despite this, Saturn ensures that responsibility remains. You may feel a strong duty toward your family even when emotional closeness is lacking. Saturn's aspects from the second house deepen these themes. Its aspect on the fourth house often creates emotional distance from the mother or stress within the home environment. Early education may face interruptions or challenges, making learning feel like effort rather than joy. Owning property or establishing a peaceful home life is usually delayed until the mid-30s. Despite difficulties, you feel responsible for your mother and family, often stepping into a caretaker role even when it feels heavy. The aspect on the 8th house limits ease in shared resources, inheritances, and relationships with in-laws. Joint assets with a spouse may take time to build, and financial cooperation can feel complicated. Relationships with in-laws often remain formal or distant, especially until midlife. On the positive side, Saturn here protects you from major sudden losses or accidents, contributing to longevity. Interest in occult or hidden knowledge may be limited early on but can grow later as emotional maturity develops. Saturn's aspect on the 11th house further slows financial gains and social expansion. Income from regular sources increases gradually, not suddenly. Elder sibling relationships may feel strained or distant, and your social circle tends to remain small. You are selective about friendships and often prefer meaningful connections over many casual ones. Gains come through sustained effort rather than luck or networking alone. Emotionally, this placement can make you feel like you are always catching up in life, catching up financially, emotionally, or socially. This perception fades as Saturn's lessons mature. After your mid-30s, restrictions ease noticeably. Financial discipline begins to pay off, confidence stabilizes, and your values become clearer. You stop measuring success by comparison and start defining it on your own terms. One of the most important lessons Saturn teaches you here is integrity. Wealth gained without ethics never feels satisfying to you. You are meant to build resources honestly, even if it takes longer. Over time, your financial life becomes solid because it is built on responsibility rather than impulse. By midlife, many people with Saturn in the second house become extremely reliable providers, not just financially, but emotionally. You understand scarcity, value, and endurance at a level few others do. What once felt like fear transforms into wisdom. You learn when to save, when to spend, and when to trust yourself. Ultimately, Saturn in the second house shapes you into someone who understands that real security is not just money in the bank, but self-respect, discipline, and emotional resilience. Your early struggles are not punishment, they are preparation. What you build later in life lasts because it is rooted in responsibility, patience, and a deep understanding of value, both material and personal. When Saturn is placed in your third house, you may find that communication, learning, and how you express yourself play a larger role in your life than most people realize, but in a way that doesn't always come easily. From early on, you might have felt a seriousness around the act of speaking, as if words carried weight, and you had to think long before using them. Casual conversation and fluff probably never felt natural. Instead, you prefer to speak only when you have something practical to say or when responsibility calls you to it. This is a place in the chart that governs not just how you speak, but how you think, how you undertake self-effort, and how you interact with your immediate environment, including siblings and neighbors. Saturn's presence here slows things down and teaches you that communication must be chosen with intention rather than thrown out casually. You may have grown up with anxiety about your own intelligence, or worry that others thought you weren't sharp enough. If your parents set very high standards or pushed you to achieve without much emotional support, that could have deepened this fear. You might have felt isolated in your thoughts, reluctant to share them, or even cautious about how others would judge you when you spoke. What looked like shyness from the outside was often a protective mechanism. You were guarding an inner uncertainty about your skills and abilities. Yet beneath that silence is a mind that observes deeply, notices details others overlook, and processes information with care. Over time, that careful mental habit becomes a strength, not a restriction. Saturn in this area often restricts easy communication until later in life, and you may notice that only after your mid-30s do you begin to speak or write with confidence. Before that, you likely think back on earlier years and wonder how many times you hesitated because you feared being misunderstood or judged. Conversations may have felt heavy rather than light, and you might have felt like an observer in your own mind more often than a participant. This isn't just introversion, it's Saturn showing you that speaking with depth and authority takes time and life experience. Many people with this placement eventually find that their reserved communication style becomes powerful precisely because it is well considered and purposeful. Relationships with younger siblings may also have felt complicated or distant. You may have experienced them more as figures of responsibility rather than playmates, or you might even have very few close siblings. When Saturn influences sibling relationships, there's often a feeling of restraint, pressure, or emotional distance, especially in youth. You might have felt responsible for them rather than emotionally close, or communication with them may not have come easily. This dynamic challenges you to learn patience, perseverance, and deep listening, rather than casual exchange. When it comes to your studies and gathering information, Saturn in the third house can make learning demanding. If you had breaks, delays, or challenges in your schooling, those experiences likely taught you resilience and discipline. For some people with this placement, completing higher education can feel slow or more effortful than it seems for others. Yet this is also a placement that rewards persistence. What you master through patient effort tends to be lasting and deep. You may even excel in research, technical writing, or long-term analytic projects because your mind is built for endurance rather than speed. Your journey into business or independent self-effort may also reflect similar timing. Early in life, you might hesitate to take risks, overthinking potential pitfalls instead of simply beginning. You ponder long before acting, especially in ventures where self-initiative is required. But Saturn here teaches the value of calculated effort, and by your mid-30s or later, that caution often transforms into strategic courage. At that point, you frequently find that you are ready to take on significant self-directed work, even entrepreneurship, precisely because you have learned to assess risks thoughtfully rather than impulsively. Saturn's aspects also tell a story of gradual maturation. When Saturn aspects the fifth house of love and creativity, you may find that early romantic experiences feel dry, heavy, or testing rather than lighthearted and spontaneous. Long attachments that don't last, or rather slow-burn relationships that teach you about commitment and responsibility, are common. Arranged marriage scenarios might suit you better because they offer structure rather than the uncertainty of youthful romance. Children may come later, or they may pursue education or life paths far from you, creating distance that tests your capacity for patience and acceptance. Through its aspect on the ninth house, the area of religion, philosophy, and higher thought, Saturn encourages you to question belief systems rather than accept them uncritically in your early years. You may have dismissed religion or traditional philosophy as irrelevant or superficial when you were younger. Only with time, experience, and maturity do these subjects begin to take on meaning for you, often in practical or grounded ways rather than in abstract faith. This reflects ongoing growth in worldview and the ability to integrate serious thinking into your personal philosophy. When Saturn aspects the 12th house of foreign lands, spirituality, and imagination, you might feel cut off from international opportunities or dreamlike experiences early on. Traveling abroad, engaging deeply in spiritual retreats, or exploring imaginative pursuits may feel distant or restricted for a long time. This same influence helps keep expenses under control, making you disciplined about losses and financial freedom. You may eventually travel or expand your horizons, but usually through structured opportunities rather than spontaneous ones. Your mental health is an area worth attention with this placement. Because Saturn slows and deepens thought, you may find yourself alone in your mind more often than you'd like. Overthinking, self-doubt, and a tendency to internalize worries can be draining. Finding healthy ways to express yourself, whether through writing, disciplined communication, or purpose-driven conversations, can be tremendously grounding and empowering. In time, many people with Saturn here find that their voice becomes one of their greatest strengths. You speak less, but what you do say carries depth, seriousness, and clarity. You are not loud, but you are heard. Your words are measured, intentional, and increasingly respected as you grow older. Saturn here turns what once felt like a limitation into a foundation for wisdom, resilience, and thoughtful communication that others look to for guidance. When Saturn is positioned in your 4th house, your experience of home, family, and inner emotional life tends to feel heavier and more demanding than most. This placement often suggests that you have carried responsibility from a very young age, perhaps long before you were ready for it. You might have felt like the adult in the family even as a child, taking care of tasks, watching younger ones, or smoothing over tensions. While other children were free to play and explore, you may have felt watched, protective, or obligated to keep things in order. This early expectation to shoulder responsibility can create a world where emotional vulnerability feels risky and intimacy feels ambiguous or hard to navigate. Your upbringing likely shaped your inner world in ways that made you both strong and cautious. In many cases with Saturn in the 4th, parents, especially the mother, may have seemed distant, strict, or emotionally unavailable. There may not have been the kind of affection you longed for, even if basic needs were met. You may have felt unseen or misunderstood, leaving you with a sense of solitude in your emotional landscape. Because of this, you can be exceptionally reserved about your personal life, guarding your feelings and fearing that opening up will lead to disappointment or rejection. Your emotional needs may feel vague or hard to articulate, not because they aren't real, but because vulnerability never felt safe early on. Growing up in a disciplined or rigid household can make you highly organized and structured in how you approach your life now. At home, order matters to you, not just physically, but emotionally. You may crave stability, routine, and predictability, and feel unsettled by chaos or unpredictability. This can make you exceptionally reliable and dependable, but it can also make it difficult to let go, relax, or allow spontaneity. Some people with this placement describe their inner experience as carrying the weight of home on their shoulders, where responsibility and care for others come before personal ease. It's possible that your relationship with your mother was serious, duty-oriented, or even strained. Some with this Saturn placement find themselves separated from their home or mother early in life, whether physically or emotionally. This separation isn't necessarily dramatic. It can be subtle, like a lack of warmth, affection, or emotional closeness, but it still leaves a lasting imprint. You may find, even as an adult, that you feel protective of family members, but you struggle to express love in ways that feel easy or natural. You might overcompensate by being overly dutiful or responsible, hoping that your effort can fill the emotional gaps you experienced early on. Saturn in the 4th house also influences your feelings about home ownership and real estate. While you may be highly serious about building a stable home, the path to acquiring your own property can involve obstacles, delays, and effort. Unlike some people who accumulate possessions or buy property early and easily, you may find that it takes patience, persistence, and hard work to secure a solid base. The same discipline that makes early life challenging often leads to real success in real estate over time. Many with this placement do well in businesses related to property, land, or construction because they understand stability deeply, having lived its absence. Education and career direction can also be shaped by this placement. The 4th house is connected with basic education and the foundation of learning, and Saturn here can make schooling feel serious or demanding. You may have felt pressure to perform well academically, not for personal exploration but to meet high expectations or secure future stability. As a result, you may approach learning with discipline and persistence rather than curiosity alone. Over time, this seriousness around knowledge can translate into strength in structured fields like law, administration, or medicine, areas where discipline, order, and careful thinking are essential. Saturn's aspect to the 6th house further shapes your experience of work, health, and challenges. You may find that you deal with obstacles, rivals, or daily struggles with persistence rather than avoidance. This gives you the capacity to overcome difficulties that might overwhelm others. You might also find satisfaction in routines, structured work environments, or roles where you can resolve problems effectively and systematically. Though everyday duties can sometimes feel burdensome, they also build resilience and skill. The influence of Saturn on your 10th house, the house of career and public life, suggests that your professional path is built on organization, seriousness, and steady effort. You may excel in areas that require responsibility, authority, and reliability. Law and medicine, as well as government or administration, are fields where your disciplined approach can become a real asset. Early career progress may feel slow or demanding. You don't rush forward, but you build something stable and respected over time. In social and professional roles, people may see you as someone who can be trusted with complex tasks and serious responsibility. Saturn's aspect on your 1st house influences your overall personality and life path. It strengthens your sense of discipline, structure, and self-control. You are likely someone who values order, responsibility, and integrity, and you instinctively follow rules rather than defy them. While this can make you reliable and grounded, it may also make you hard on yourself, especially when life doesn't go as planned. You may set high standards for yourself and feel pressure to meet them consistently, which can sometimes create stress or a feeling of burden. Learning to balance self-expectation with self-compassion is a lifelong lesson with this placement. Emotionally, Saturn in the 4th house challenges you to develop intimacy in ways that feel safe and secure. Because your early life may have lacked emotional warmth or predictable affection, you may fear vulnerability or avoid situations where you feel exposed. This doesn't mean you are incapable of deep connection, quite the opposite. You care profoundly, but you may take time to open up and trust. Emotional expression may come in practical ways rather than romantic ones, through caregiving, loyalty, and consistent presence. Over time, you learn that vulnerability is not weakness, and emotional honesty can coexist with responsibility. Saturn here teaches that stability and inner peace are not given, they must be built with effort, patience, and self-awareness. What once felt like coldness or emotional restriction can become a foundation for deep emotional maturity and strength. You may find that, as you grow older, you naturally create a home and inner life that is orderly, secure, and emotionally rich, precisely because you have learned to structure and protect it through experience. When Saturn is placed in your 5th house, the way you experience joy, romance, creativity, and even the idea of children tends to feel more serious and structured than it does for many people. This house traditionally governs your ability to play, express yourself, fall in love, take risks, and imagine life beyond responsibilities, all of which can feel weighed down by Saturn's influence. Instead of floating effortlessly into artistic inspiration or carefree fun, you may find that everything meaningful in this part of life requires discipline, patience, and sustained effort. You may carry a sense that your inner spark was dimmed early in life, especially by parental expectations or critical voices. If one or both parents were hard on you, dismissive of your aspirations, or quick to point out flaws, you might have internalized the belief that happiness is fragile, that if you let yourself feel joyful or confident, it could be taken away. That early experience can make your emotional world feel heavy and guarded, creating an underlying anxiety that joy, affection, or pleasure must be earned rather than freely enjoyed. It's not unusual with this placement to have a profound inner desire for recognition and attention, yet simultaneously feel afraid of vulnerability or rejection. In terms of personal expression and creativity, you may find that you are drawn to skills and talents that require long, structured cultivation rather than spontaneous bursts of inspiration. Whether it's art, writing, performance, or any form of self-expression, you're likely the kind of person who approaches these with seriousness and a strong work ethic. While your peers may explore hobbies casually, you take creative development as a long-term journey, often setting goals and sticking to them with discipline. In fact, this pattern can be a strength. What you build creatively, you build to last, even if it takes years before you see tangible results. Your relationship to love and romance can reflect this same theme of maturity followed by reward. Early in life, love may have felt like something that came with caveats, conditions, or lessons rather than pure enjoyment. You may have experienced long relationships that ended abruptly or relationships that felt like more work than play. Saturn here encourages you to learn through experience, and often that means that love comes seriously, not easily. Rather than a fairy tale romance, your path often requires reflection, understanding of reality, and learning to love with responsibility and intentionality. Many with this placement find that they are better suited for partnerships that begin later in life, where both partners approach commitment with maturity and purpose. Delays or challenges in matters of romance can feel particularly disheartening when you feel ready for love but life keeps postponing key relationships. These delays are not punitive but formative. They help you understand what you truly need in a partner, what you're willing to commit to, and what you're not willing to compromise on. Because Saturn teaches through structure and responsibility, you tend to treat love not as something whimsical, but as something that needs respect, clarity, and patience. Children and parenting are also colored by this placement. Saturn in the 5th house does not mean that you can have children, but it often suggests that parenthood comes later, or that your journey as a parent feels serious and full of lessons. Some experience delays in conceiving, while others may find that their first child arrives at a time when they are more emotionally prepared for the responsibility. Even when children are present, relationships can feel tinged with duty and concern, rather than effortless joy. The discipline Saturn brings can make you a responsible, structured parent, but emotional connection may require conscious effort, especially if you tend to guard your feelings or keep boundaries tight. Your approach to education and learning reflects the same pattern of discipline over spontaneity. You may not be someone who excels by last-minute study or intuitive grasp. Instead, success often comes through steady effort over time. If you thought you could coast your way through school or master subjects at the last minute, that approach doesn't work well with Saturn here. You are built for long-term focus and realistic planning, even if it feels restrictive at times. Many with this placement discover that they develop deep knowledge in specific fields or excel in areas where sustained effort is valued. Emotionally, you may notice a recurring theme of fear around pleasure and risk. Saturn's influence makes you cautious about joy, as if you are always evaluating whether something is safe or worthwhile before you allow yourself to enjoy it. In relationships, creativity, or social settings, you might hold back until you feel fully prepared, which can sometimes make you seem reserved or serious to others. Over time, as you mature, you learn to balance this caution with a deeper trust in yourself, allowing joy and play to enter your life without self-criticism. Saturn's aspects also play a part in shaping your life path. Its aspect to the 7th house, the house of marriage and partnerships, hints that waiting for marriage until your 30s often leads to more grounded relationships. When both partners come into the union with matured perspectives, the relationship has a far better chance of being lasting and rooted in responsibility rather than youthful impulsiveness. Its influence on the 11th house of hopes and desires suggests that many of your deepest wishes will take time to fulfill. Where someone else might see quick gains or immediate success, your growth in this area unfolds in phases. Your dreams often require restructuring, refinement, and patience before they come true, a process of learning that rewards persistence over speed. Lastly, Saturn's aspect on the 2nd house of family and wealth reflects early experiences where you may have felt you lacked support or encouragement at home. You might have needed to take on responsibility earlier than others, perhaps contributing to the family financially or emotionally. You often speak when it matters and carry yourself with a seriousness that comes from having to grow up quickly. Overall, Saturn in the 5th house teaches you that what truly matters in life, love, creativity, children, joy, and self-expression, isn't gained overnight. These areas of life are not off-limits to you, but they ask you to approach them with patience, discipline, and respect. The rewards you eventually receive are deep, stable, and long-lasting precisely because you had to earn them. When Saturn sits in your 6th house, your approach to work, health, and daily responsibilities feels more serious, methodical, and demanding than it does for many people. You are not someone who sees your job as just a way to get by. Instead, work becomes a core part of your identity and sense of duty. You may be the person who naturally steps into tasks others avoid, who organizes routines when chaos looms, and who takes responsibility seriously even when no one else does. This placement often makes you extremely dependable and conscientious, but it also means that pressure, internal or external, regularly finds its way into your work life. You may find that you set very high standards for yourself, especially when it comes to productivity and efficiency. There can be a sense that nothing is ever quite good enough, and that pushes you to work harder than most. While this drive helps you accomplish a lot, it also puts you at risk of overworking or becoming overly self-critical. If you don't learn to temper this inner intensity, it can negatively affect both your physical and mental health. It's common with this placement for people to feel a kind of pressure to perform perfectly and to worry about flaws or gaps in their work, even when their achievements are significant. Health and routine are themes that Saturn emphasizes strongly in the 6th house. You may be the type of person who insists on a strict daily schedule, healthy habits, and clear structure in how you take care of your body. If you neglect your health or ignore early signs of stress, you can feel its impact deeply because Saturn here often pushes the body to reflect what the mind is carrying. Routine exercise, disciplined eating, and regular rest are essential tools for maintaining your balance. Without them, stress and burnout can build quietly until they demand your attention. Saturn in this house also relates strongly to how you handle obstacles and competition. You are likely to encounter challenges in your workplace that test your patience and resilience. Rivalries, disputes, or demanding tasks may not disappear easily, and sometimes it feels like you're constantly proving your worth through effort rather than through quick success. Yet the paradox of this placement is that it builds strength through hardship. Over time, you become someone who can face opposition, persist in difficult conditions, and rise above challenges that might overwhelm others. Saturn in the 6th house often teaches that resilience is not about avoiding struggle, but about enduring it with steadfast focus. One of the reassuring aspects of Saturn in the 6th house is your capacity to win over enemies, obstacles, and conflicts. In traditional astrology, the 6th house is considered a house of struggles, with debts, adversaries, and health issues, and Saturn's presence here means these things get suppressed or overcome through persistent effort rather than avoidance. What you face early in life may feel heavy, but as you grow, you become someone who can manage complexity and handle friction with composure. This resilience often leads others to respect your strength and tenacity. Your career path tends to reflect Saturn's seriousness about work and structure. You may stay at one job longer than your peers, build deep expertise in specific areas, and slowly climb toward positions of responsibility. Promotions or recognition might not come quickly. They usually arrive after years of consistent effort and demonstrated reliability. In fact, many with Saturn in the 6th house find that meaningful rewards come later in life, particularly after the mid-30s, when the foundations planted earlier begin to bear fruit. This slow but steady progress builds credibility and long-lasting success. You might also notice a certain distance in your daily social environment, a feeling that your colleagues or daily contacts are not as emotionally close as you might wish. This isn't necessarily loneliness. Rather, Saturn encourages professionalism and boundaries in everyday interactions. You may prefer to keep your work life separate from your personal life, talking only when it matters and focusing on tasks rather than small talk. Over time, though, you discover that people respect your purposeful communication and reliability, even if casual friendliness is not your primary mode. Saturn's effect here also pushes you to look at your relationship with service and humility. Some astrologers describe this placement as karmic, that your soul chose this focus to learn lessons around duty, service to others, and self-discipline. You may find that helping others through structured methods, whether as a healer, counselor, mediator, manager, or someone who resolves disputes, becomes a key part of your life's work. Discipline and patience become not just personal practices, but the very tools through which you support others. In terms of health, Saturn can heighten awareness of physical routines, but it can also bring challenges if you push too hard without listening to your body. In some charts, chronic or lingering health issues can occur when stress is ignored or internal pressure becomes overwhelming. These issues are not random. Saturn uses the body as a signal system for when self-care is needed. Adopting disciplined health practices not only supports your physical well-being but also channels Saturn's serious energy into positive growth. Relationships with younger siblings or close efforts may also feel structured rather than spontaneous. Your communication with them could be purposeful, direct, and practical, sometimes missing the warmth that others expect. This isn't because you don't care, it's because Saturn prioritizes function and responsibility over casual engagement. As you mature, you may learn to balance this with more ease, allowing yourself and others room for both serious efforts and lighter connection. Saturn's aspects from the 6th house extend its influence further. Its reach to the 8th house can create stress around shared resources or behind-the-scenes dynamics, prompting you to understand the deeper psychological and practical dimensions of life and relationships. It may also spark an interest in hidden sciences, mysticism, or psychology, subjects that require depth and persistence to master. The aspect on the 12th house nudges you toward introspection, spirituality, or even retreat. Sometimes your path includes periods of solitude, service abroad, or work in places that feel isolated but deeply transformative. This can be a place where you develop inner clarity, detachment, and a broader perspective on life's purpose. Saturn's aspect on the 3rd house of younger siblings, communication, and courage suggests that your efforts eventually get anchored in purposeful expression. You may not be chatty or impulsive, but when you speak or act, it's strategic, intentional, and meaningful. You learn to let your actions speak louder than words. Overall, Saturn in your 6th house is not a placement that gives quick gratification or easy comfort. Instead, it provides a powerful framework for growth through discipline, resilience, and reliable effort. What starts as challenge and constraint often becomes the foundation for your authority, endurance, and capacity to serve others meaningfully. When Saturn occupies your 7th house, relationships are never casual for you. Partnership, marriage, and one-to-one connections feel like serious life territory rather than something light or experimental. You may experience relationships as places where duty, responsibility, and endurance are constantly tested. Even when love exists, it often comes with weight, commitments, obligations, or circumstances that demand patience. This placement carries strong karmic themes, meaning the people you attract into long-term partnerships are not accidental. They come to teach resilience, accountability, and emotional maturity. You are naturally loyal and dependable in relationships. Once you commit, you take that commitment seriously and expect consistency in return. You understand that bonds don't survive on emotion alone. They require daily effort, presence, and reliability. Because of this mindset, you often give more than you receive, especially early in life. You may stay in relationships long after they stop fulfilling you, simply because you believe commitment should be honored and not abandoned easily. Saturn here tests whether you know when responsibility turns into self-neglect. Love may not come easily to you, especially in your younger years. You may find yourself questioning whether someone will ever love you with the same depth and seriousness that you offer others. There can be a quiet fear of ending up alone, not because you lack love to give, but because you worry it may not be returned in the way you need. Saturn in the 7th house asks you to build a strong foundation of self-love, so your relationships are not driven by fear of loss or obligation, but by genuine choice. Marriage is one of the most sensitive themes with this placement, and timing matters greatly. You may hear that Saturn delays marriage, but the truth is more nuanced. Saturn demands readiness. If marriage happens too early, before you understand responsibility, compromise, and realism, relationships can feel heavy, disappointing, or restrictive. Many people marry in their early 20s expecting romance to feel effortless and exciting. Saturn strips away that illusion. If you are not emotionally mature when you commit, Saturn exposes the gap between fantasy and reality, often through stress, distance, or dissatisfaction. This is why marriage after your mid-30s often works exceptionally well for you. By then, your expectations are realistic, and you are prepared for the responsibilities marriage brings. Saturn favors stability and longevity. When you choose wisely and maturely, relationships formed later in life tend to last and deepen over time. The same Saturn that causes difficulty in early commitments becomes a powerful stabilizing force once maturity is achieved. Your spouse or long-term partner is often mature, serious, or burdened with responsibilities of their own. They may be older than you, emotionally reserved, or deeply focused on work or duty. Distance can become a theme, sometimes physical, sometimes emotional, due to career demands, family obligations, or personal struggles. Relationships may feel isolating at times, even when you are not alone. Saturn teaches you to build emotional strength within yourself rather than relying entirely on your partner for fulfillment. Because Saturn governs long duration, relationships here tend to endure, for better or worse. If a relationship is healthy, it becomes deeply rooted and resilient. If it is unhealthy, separation can feel slow and difficult. Divorce or endings rarely come easily or quickly. This is why conscious choice matters more than impulse with this placement. Saturn rewards patience and discernment but punishes haste. The 7th house also represents business partnerships and dealings with the public. You may be well suited for professions that involve negotiation, structure, and long-term contracts. Business partnerships work best when roles are clearly defined and expectations are realistic. Career paths connected to law, judiciary, diplomacy, business, metals, infrastructure, or administration often suit this placement well. Saturn gives you the ability to handle responsibility in public dealings and manage complex agreements over time. Saturn's aspect on your 9th house influences belief systems and philosophy. In early life, you may question religion, traditional teachings, or the worldview passed down by your father or authority figures. Blind faith does not sit well with you. You prefer experience and logic over doctrine. Over time, especially after your 30s, your beliefs tend to stabilize. You may develop a grounded philosophy shaped by lived experience rather than inherited ideas. The aspect Saturn casts on your 1st house has a deep effect on your sense of self. You may feel suppressed or restrained in expressing your identity, especially in youth. Relationships may feel like they define you, sometimes limiting your ability to prioritize yourself. You may mold yourself to meet others' expectations, forgetting your own needs in the process. A key lesson here is learning that partnership should not erase individuality. When self-respect grows, relationships improve naturally. Saturn's influence on your 4th house shapes your inner emotional world and family life. You may have grown up in a disciplined or emotionally restrained home environment, especially influenced by a strict or duty-oriented mother. As you mature, you may become critical of your mother or family patterns, especially if emotional needs were unmet. Home life often feels structured rather than emotionally expressive, and peace of mind develops slowly through effort rather than ease. Emotionally, Saturn in the 7th house teaches boundaries. You are not meant to lose yourself in others, nor to carry relationships out of obligation alone. You are here to learn balanced commitment, where loyalty exists alongside self-respect. Once this lesson is integrated, relationships become a source of strength rather than burden. Over time, this placement matures beautifully. You become someone capable of deep, lasting partnerships built on trust, responsibility, and realism. What feels heavy early in life transforms into emotional wisdom. Saturn doesn't deny love, it refines it. And when love finally settles into your life, it tends to stay. When Saturn is placed in your 8th house, life rarely feels simple or predictable. This is one of the most intense placements for Saturn, because the 8th house deals with transformation, intimacy, shared resources, fears, losses, and deep psychological change. With Saturn here, you may experience hesitation or anxiety around change itself. You often prefer stability, even when something is no longer working, because transformation feels risky and emotionally exhausting. Sudden events in life may feel heavy, not because they are constant, but because when they do occur, you are left with responsibility rather than escape. You may notice a deep fear of loss or abandonment, often rooted in early emotional experiences or past relationships. This fear can make you cautious about emotional intimacy. Opening up fully, trusting others with your vulnerabilities, or sharing power in close relationships may not come easily. You may protect yourself by staying emotionally guarded, even while being loyal and committed. Saturn here doesn't remove your capacity for intimacy, but it makes you approach it carefully, slowly, and often with underlying anxiety. Shared resources are another sensitive area. The 8th house governs joint finances, inheritances, insurance, and assets built with a spouse or partner. With Saturn here, anything involving shared money tends to move slowly. Creating wealth with a partner may take longer than expected, and financial dependency on others is usually uncomfortable for you. You prefer control, structure, and clarity around finances, and unexpected expenses or obligations can feel especially stressful. Saturn teaches you patience in this area and pushes you to develop long-term financial responsibility rather than relying on sudden gains. One notable protective quality of Saturn in the 8th house is longevity. This placement is traditionally associated with a long life, as Saturn delays the themes of the house it occupies. Major accidents, sudden deaths, or extreme instability are often reduced. Saturn also governs aging, and while life may be long, old age can come with responsibilities, health concerns, or emotional weight that requires endurance. This placement asks you to take responsibility not just for living long, but for living wisely. Your relationship with in-laws often feels distant or formal, especially earlier in life. Emotional closeness may be limited, and interactions may feel obligation-based rather than warm. This distance tends to be strongest until your mid-30s, after which things may soften, though they rarely become deeply intimate. Saturn here creates boundaries in extended family dynamics, often keeping you somewhat separate from your partner's family system. Emotionally, Saturn in the 8th house can cause you to hold on to past pain for too long. You may suppress trauma, disappointment, or unresolved emotional experiences rather than processing them openly. When emotions remain buried, they can manifest as anxiety, trust issues, or unhealthy coping mechanisms over time. This placement carries a strong lesson: transformation is unavoidable. Avoiding emotional change only increases internal pressure. When you consciously work through fears and emotional wounds, Saturn rewards you with deep inner strength and psychological maturity. At the same time, this placement can produce extraordinary depth. You may be naturally drawn to subjects others avoid: psychology, healing, research, mysticism, or occult knowledge. Saturn gives discipline and persistence, and the 8th house gives access to hidden layers of life. Together, they can make you an exceptional healer, therapist, investigator, or spiritual guide, especially after maturity. Your understanding of pain, loss, and rebirth becomes wisdom that can support others. In relationships, you are extremely loyal, but you may struggle with letting go. Even when a relationship becomes emotionally heavy or distant, you may hold on out of fear of abandonment or responsibility. Saturn here tests your ability to distinguish between commitment and emotional stagnation. Learning when to release, forgive, or transform a bond is one of your major life lessons. Saturn's aspects further shape your journey. Its aspect on the 10th house of career is significant, as this is Saturn's natural domain. Career growth tends to improve notably after your mid-30s. Early professional life may feel slow, demanding, or uncertain, but persistence pays off. Over time, you build authority, expertise, and respect, particularly in structured, research-based, healing, financial, or administrative fields. Your career path benefits from your ability to manage crises, complexity, and responsibility. The aspect on the 2nd house of family and personal wealth often creates emotional or physical distance from your family of origin. You may live away from relatives or feel disconnected from traditional family support. Saving money can be challenging earlier in life, as responsibilities or unexpected expenses interfere with stability. Financial security improves with age, but only after you learn discipline and long-term planning rather than relying on short-term fixes. Saturn's final aspect to the 5th house of education, creativity, and children delays gratification in these areas. You may feel that you must take responsibility for your education entirely on your own, without much external support. Learning may feel serious rather than joyful, but it becomes deeply meaningful over time. Creativity may develop slowly, but what you create carries weight and impact. Childbirth may be delayed, or there may be emotional or physical distance between you and children due to circumstances like education, location, or responsibilities. One of the defining themes of Saturn in the 8th house is karmic responsibility. Life may place you in situations where you are required to manage crises, handle others' burdens, or navigate complex emotional or financial transitions. While this can feel exhausting, it also builds resilience. You become someone who can survive, adapt, and rebuild when life changes direction. Spiritually and psychologically, this placement demands surrender to transformation. Saturn doesn't allow shortcuts here. You are asked to confront fears rather than avoid them, to release control rather than cling to it, and to accept that change is not your enemy. When you resist transformation, life feels heavy. When you accept it, growth becomes profound. Ultimately, Saturn in the 8th house shapes you into someone deeply grounded, perceptive, and enduring. You may not have an easy emotional journey, but you gain wisdom that few others develop. Your life teaches you that true strength is not found in avoiding darkness, but in learning how to walk through it with patience, discipline, and courage. When Saturn is placed in your 9th house, your relationship with belief systems, higher knowledge, faith, and life philosophy tends to be serious, questioning, and slowly evolving. You are not someone who accepts ideas simply because they are inherited or socially accepted. From early in life, you may feel compelled to examine what you believe and why you believe it. Matters related to religion, morality, justice, and truth occupy a large mental space for you, often becoming lifelong areas of focus rather than passing interests. If you were raised within a strict religious or ideological environment, you may eventually distance yourself from it. In many cases, this placement produces skepticism early on, especially if belief systems were imposed rather than explored freely. You may reject religion altogether for a period, adopting an atheist, agnostic, or nihilistic outlook. This is not because you lack depth, but because Saturn demands authenticity. Blind faith does not sit well with you. Over time, you often develop a personal philosophy that is carefully constructed, well-researched, and rooted in lived experience rather than doctrine. You may notice that growth in matters of fortune and opportunity feels delayed. The ninth house is traditionally associated with luck and divine grace, and Saturn here slows these rewards. Success does not come easily or suddenly. Instead, you are asked to earn wisdom, recognition, and expansion through effort and perseverance. This can feel frustrating when you see others benefiting from opportunities that seem effortless, but Saturn's lesson is clear: what you build slowly becomes stable and lasting. Your relationship with your father often reflects Saturn's influence. There may be emotional or physical distance between you, sometimes due to separation, responsibilities, or differences in worldview. Even when your father is present, the bond may feel formal, serious, or based on duty rather than emotional closeness. Since the ninth house represents the father as the first teacher, this placement often shows that guidance came through discipline rather than warmth. You may respect your father, but feel misunderstood by him, especially regarding beliefs and life direction. Teachers, mentors, and gurus also play a structured role in your life. You may encounter strict educators or authority figures who demand discipline and effort rather than offering encouragement. Relationships with teachers tend to be formal and goal-oriented, focused more on learning outcomes than emotional connection. While this can feel restrictive early on, it often builds strong intellectual foundations. You tend to learn best through long-term study, specialization, and rigorous training rather than casual exploration. Higher education is an important but demanding area. Saturn in the ninth house favors depth over breadth. You may take longer to complete degrees, change academic direction after careful consideration, or pursue education later in life. Fields connected to law, ethics, governance, philosophy, and structured knowledge are especially supported. Many people with this placement excel as lawyers, judges, professors, or scholars, particularly in subjects that require logic, interpretation, and discipline. Teaching can become a calling, but usually after you've gained significant experience. Your worldview is not static. Even though Saturn can make you rigid in beliefs early on, life repeatedly challenges your perspectives. Over time, you are pushed to broaden your understanding through debate, exposure to different cultures, and interaction with people who think very differently from you. This growth may feel uncomfortable at first, as Saturn creates fear around expansion and unfamiliar territory. Travel, especially long-distance or international travel, is often delayed until your mid-30s, but when it happens, it tends to be purposeful rather than recreational. You may find yourself advocating strongly for what you believe in, even when others hesitate. You are not afraid to speak up for justice, ethics, or truth, especially when you feel something is fundamentally wrong. This courage can make you respected, but it can also create karmic challenges if criticism turns rigid or judgmental. Saturn here teaches balance, standing firm in your principles while remaining open to learning and correction. Saturn's aspects add further layers to your life experience. Its aspect on the 11th house shows that gains and income increase gradually through education, professional networks, and large organizations. Financial growth is steady rather than sudden, and your earnings often improve as your expertise deepens. You may benefit from working with institutions, governments, universities, or multinational organizations, particularly later in life. The aspect on the 3rd house influences communication and sibling relationships. You may experience emotional or physical distance from younger siblings, or feel that communication with them requires effort. Writing and structured communication improve significantly with age. Early on, you may struggle to express complex ideas clearly, but by your mid-30s, your ability to write, teach, or articulate philosophical or legal concepts becomes a strength. Saturn's final aspect on the 6th house highlights a strong sense of duty towards service. You may feel compelled to help others navigate obstacles, conflicts, or injustice. This placement often produces people who work tirelessly in service-oriented roles, resolving disputes, supporting those in difficulty, or advocating for fairness. Your sense of purpose strengthens when you apply your beliefs in practical ways rather than keeping them theoretical. One of the central lessons of Saturn in the ninth house is humility and wisdom. You are asked to recognize that truth is complex and evolving. Early rigidity gives way to mature understanding only when you allow yourself to question your own assumptions as deeply as you question others. Life repeatedly reminds you that growth does not come from certainty alone, but from continuous learning. Spiritually, this placement does not promise blind faith, but it offers something deeper, earned belief. Over time, you develop a philosophy that reflects both discipline and compassion, logic and experience. Your moral compass becomes strong because it has been tested. You may never follow tradition unquestioningly, but you come to respect the value of structure, ethics, and responsibility in guiding human life. Ultimately, Saturn in the ninth house shapes you into a lifelong student of truth. Expansion may be slow, but it is meaningful. Wisdom may be delayed, but it is authentic. You are not here to inherit belief systems, you are here to refine them, challenge them, and eventually pass on knowledge that has been hard-won through experience, effort, and perseverance. When Saturn is placed in your 10th house, work, responsibility, and achievement become central themes of your life. You may feel a strong internal push to accomplish something meaningful and lasting, often from a young age. Success does not feel optional to you, it feels necessary. You may carry an intense sense of duty toward your career, reputation, and the role you play in the world. Because of this, you are rarely casual about your professional life. Even when others are relaxed about their ambitions, you feel compelled to give your best effort, often taking on more than what is required. You are naturally hardworking and disciplined, sometimes to the point of becoming a workaholic. Saturn here gives you the ability to work long hours without immediate rewards, driven more by responsibility than by recognition. You may not even expect appreciation early on. Instead, you focus on doing the job correctly, thoroughly, and with integrity. This placement can also bring fear of failure. You may put immense pressure on yourself, believing that mistakes will cost you respect or authority. Learning that failure is part of growth, not a personal flaw, becomes one of your most important life lessons. Your confidence tends to develop gradually. Early in life, you may doubt yourself despite working harder than others. Over time, especially after your early 30s, something shifts. Experience begins to replace fear, and your authority grows naturally. People start trusting your judgment, seeking your guidance, and looking to you as someone who knows what they are doing. Saturn in the 10th house often creates professionals who are respected not for charm, but for reliability, mastery, and consistency. Your relationship with authority figures can be complex. You may experience friction with bosses, managers, or people in power, especially if you feel they are incompetent or unfair. At the same time, you may deeply respect mentors who are disciplined, ethical, and knowledgeable. Saturn here teaches you about hierarchy, sometimes by placing you under authority, and eventually by preparing you to become one. With time, you often step into leadership roles where your decisions carry weight, even if your title is modest. The 10th house is also connected to the father or father figures, and Saturn's influence can create emotional or physical distance here. Your father may have been absent, overly strict, emotionally unavailable, or burdened by responsibilities of his own. Even if he was present, you may have learned early to rely on yourself rather than on his guidance. This can make you self-sufficient, but it can also leave you feeling that you must carry everything alone. Over time, you may come to understand your father's limitations more clearly, though emotional closeness may remain limited. Career-wise, Saturn in the 10th house supports professions that require structure, discipline, and long-term responsibility. Law, administration, government service, judiciary roles, diplomacy, engineering, management, and any field where authority is earned through expertise are well supported. Authority here does not necessarily mean position, it means mastery. Even in unconventional fields, you become someone whose opinion matters because you know your work deeply. Recognition may be slow, but it is durable once it arrives. Saturn here delays visible success, but it never denies it. The real rewards of your effort usually become visible after the age of 30, and even more so after midlife. Before that, life tests your patience, commitment, and endurance. You may feel overlooked or underappreciated despite giving your best. This period is not punishment, it is preparation. Saturn ensures that when success comes, you are capable of handling it responsibly. Saturn's aspects further shape your experience. Its aspect on the 12th house can initially restrict spiritual exploration and private emotional life. You may find it hard to slow down, reflect, or engage in spiritual practices early on because work and responsibilities dominate your attention. Solitude may feel uncomfortable at first. Over time, you may develop a more grounded, practical spirituality, one that integrates discipline rather than escapism. The aspect on the fourth house brings a strict or disciplined home environment. Home may feel more like a place of responsibility than relaxation. You may become critical of your mother or feel that emotional nurturing was limited or conditional. At the same time, Saturn never removes responsibility, it increases it. You often feel a strong sense of duty toward your parents, especially as they age, even if emotional warmth is not easily expressed. Saturn's final aspect on the seventh house significantly influences relationships and marriage. Marriage is often delayed with this placement, and that delay is usually beneficial. Early marriage may clash with your career focus or sense of responsibility. If marriage happens too soon, it can feel burdensome or restrictive. Waiting until your mid-30s allows you to approach partnership with maturity, realism, and balance. When marriage does happen, it tends to be serious, responsibility-oriented, and long-lasting rather than romanticized. Emotionally, Saturn in the 10th house can make you appear serious or reserved. You may struggle to relax or enjoy life without feeling productive. Rest can feel undeserved unless you've worked hard for it. Over time, learning to separate your worth from your achievements becomes essential for mental and emotional well-being. Saturn's lesson here is not just about building a career, but about building self-respect without constant self-pressure. In public life, you are often seen as dependable, composed, and dedicated. Others may come to you for advice, training, or leadership, especially later in life. Teaching, mentoring, or guiding others becomes a natural extension of your experience. You don't lead through charisma, you lead through example. Ultimately, Saturn in the 10th house gives you the potential for lasting achievement. Your path may feel heavy early on, filled with responsibility and delayed rewards, but it is one of the most powerful placements for long-term success. You are here to build something solid, a reputation, a career, a legacy, through patience, discipline, and integrity. What you achieve may take time, but it stands the test of time once it is built. When Saturn is placed in your 11th house, your relationship with friendships, networks, income, and long-term goals tends to be serious and selective. You may not be someone who easily blends into large social groups or enjoys superficial connections. Even from a young age, you likely sense that friendships carried responsibility and meaning, not just entertainment. While others might casually drift in and out of social circles, you tend to approach connections with caution, depth, and a desire for stability. As a result, you may have many acquaintances but only a small number of people you genuinely trust. Making friends, especially with people your own age, may have felt difficult earlier in life. You may have felt out of place among peers, either because your mindset was more mature or because you were uninterested in shallow interactions. Over time, you may notice that you are naturally drawn to older, experienced, or purpose-driven individuals, people who take life seriously and have a clear sense of direction. You value substance over popularity, and you would rather be alone than surrounded by people who feel emotionally or intellectually unengaging. You take friendships very seriously, sometimes so seriously that they begin to feel like obligations. You may feel responsible for your friends' well-being, struggles, or moral choices. While this loyalty is one of your greatest strengths, it can also become a burden if you overextend yourself emotionally. Saturn here teaches you to set boundaries in friendships, to recognize that being dependable does not mean carrying everyone else's weight. Periods of social withdrawal are common with this placement. You may need solitude to process your thoughts, reflect on life, and recharge mentally. At times, this can swing to the opposite extreme, where you immerse yourself in social activity for weeks to escape your own thoughts. This fluctuation between isolation and engagement is not inconsistency. It's your way of balancing Saturn's inward seriousness with the 11th house's outward social nature. A strong sense of justice runs through this placement. You are sensitive to unfairness in groups, organizations, or social systems. You may find yourself standing up for what is right, even if it costs you popularity. Ethical concerns often guide your long-term goals, and you may feel uncomfortable benefiting from situations that seem unjust or exploitative. Over time, this moral backbone earns you respect, even if it makes your path more demanding. The 11th house governs income, gains, and fulfillment of desires, and Saturn here brings results, but never without effort. This is one of Saturn's more comfortable positions because the 11th house aligns with Saturn's nature of long-term planning, structure, and collective systems. Gains tend to come through large organizations, networks, institutions, or structured environments rather than quick or independent wins. Financial growth is gradual, steady, and earned through persistence rather than luck. Unlike some Saturn placements where rewards take decades, here results often arrive a little earlier, typically within an 8-year cycle rather than 10. Still, patience is required. You may work harder than others for the same rewards early on, but over time your consistency pays off. Entrepreneurship, speculative ventures, or long-term investments can be fruitful for you, provided they are approached realistically and with discipline rather than risk-taking alone. Elder siblings often play a supportive or influential role in your life. You may gain guidance, opportunities, or material support through them, though the relationship may feel formal rather than emotionally expressive. Saturn tends to structure sibling bonds around responsibility rather than ease. Your long-term goals are not casual wishes, they are carefully constructed ambitions. You don't dream without a plan. You may revise your goals repeatedly, questioning whether they align with your values and sense of purpose. Fulfillment does not come from achieving everything quickly, but from knowing that what you achieve is meaningful and sustainable. Saturn's aspects add further depth to this placement. Its aspect on the first house brings seriousness to your personality from an early age. You may feel that life asks more of you than it does of others. This seriousness can make you appear reserved or mature beyond your years, even when you are young. You may carry a sense of responsibility for shaping your own path, often without relying heavily on others. The aspect on the fifth house influences education, creativity, happiness, and children. Your education may face interruptions, delays, or obstacles, especially if you try to rush the process. Saturn pushes you to take learning seriously and build knowledge step by step. Creativity may feel blocked at times, especially if you judge yourself too harshly. Childbirth is often delayed, and relationships with children can feel distant at times, particularly if they pursue education or opportunities far from home. Despite the distance, a strong sense of responsibility toward children remains. Saturn's final aspect on the 8th house opens a deeper layer of life after maturity. After your mid-30s, you may develop a strong interest in research, psychology, healing, or occult subjects. You become more comfortable exploring life's hidden dimensions, transformation, loss, rebirth, and emotional depth. This interest often arises after you have established stability in the outer world, allowing you to turn inward without fear. One of the major lessons of Saturn in the 11th house is learning to balance ambition with connection. You are here to build something meaningful within society, but not at the cost of your emotional well-being. Friendships should support your growth, not drain you. Goals should inspire you, not imprison you. Over time, Saturn rewards you with a network that is small but powerful, income that is steady rather than volatile, and goals that are fulfilled not quickly, but completely. You may never be the most socially visible person in the room, but you become someone whose presence matters, someone respected for integrity, perseverance, and depth. Ultimately, Saturn in the 11th house shapes you into a person who understands that true success is not measured by numbers alone, but by the quality of connections, the integrity of achievements, and the endurance of what you build. What you gain in life lasts because you worked for it, refined it, and stayed loyal to it over time. When Saturn is placed in your 12th house, much of your life work happens behind the scenes, within the subconscious, and in spaces that are not immediately visible to others. This is one of the most inward, psychologically intense placements for Saturn. You may feel emotions very deeply, often more intensely than you can easily explain. Fear, doubt, guilt, or a vague sense of heaviness can exist beneath the surface, even when nothing is obviously wrong in your outer life. Saturn here asks you to confront what is hidden, your fears, insecurities, and the parts of yourself you may prefer not to look at. From an early age, you may feel overwhelmed by your inner world. Sensitivity is strong, but it doesn't always feel like a gift at first. You may doubt yourself frequently, question your worth, or feel burdened by responsibility without knowing exactly why. This placement often brings a fear of the unknown, fear of spirituality, fear of emotional depth, fear of losing control when you look too deeply within. Saturn pushes you to build strength not by avoiding these inner spaces, but by slowly learning how to face them with discipline and honesty. A strong need for solitude is common with Saturn in the 12th house. You may require regular periods of isolation to restore your energy, and regain mental clarity. At times, you may use isolation as a form of escape, withdrawing when life feels overwhelming. While solitude is necessary for you, Saturn's lesson is to ensure that isolation becomes a tool for healing rather than avoidance. Too much withdrawal can increase fear and disconnection, while balanced solitude helps you process emotions and regain stability. The 12th house is traditionally associated with losses, and Saturn here reinforces the idea that nothing comes easily. Even when Saturn is strong or well-placed, results in 12th house matters require double effort. Early in life, opportunities related to foreign lands, spirituality, or higher inner growth may feel blocked. You may want to explore beyond your familiar environment, but circumstances delay or restrict those chances until your mid-30s. When foreign travel or relocation finally happens, it is rarely casual. Once you move away, returning to your homeland can also feel delayed or complicated. Financially, Saturn in the 12th house brings an interesting contradiction. On one hand, it limits unnecessary expenses and reduces reckless losses. You are rarely careless with money. On the other hand, saving can still feel difficult, especially early in life. Money may come in gradually rather than suddenly, often through foreign lands, multinational companies, institutions, or isolated environments. Over time, earnings improve steadily rather than dramatically. You learn financial discipline through experience rather than luck. Spiritually, progress feels slow at first. Saturn restricts spiritual growth in early life, especially if you try to escape reality through belief systems or fantasy. You may question spirituality deeply or feel disconnected from it altogether. This is not denial, it is preparation. Saturn demands that spirituality be practical, grounded, and lived rather than imagined. As you mature, especially after your mid-30s, spiritual understanding deepens significantly. You begin to integrate discipline, service, and inner responsibility into your spiritual path rather than chasing mystical experiences. One powerful outcome of Saturn in the 12th house is service. At some stage in life, you may feel drawn toward helping those who are isolated, marginalized, or suffering, the underprivileged, the sick, or those forgotten by society. Work connected to hospitals, asylums, charitable institutions, prisons, research facilities, or healing environments can become meaningful. Your empathy, once a source of overwhelm, turns into a strength when paired with Saturn's discipline. Saturn's aspects further shape your experiences. Its aspect on the second house of family and personal wealth often creates physical or emotional distance from your family. You may live away from your birthplace or feel disconnected from family support from an early age. Saving money can feel blocked for a long time, even when earnings are decent. Speech may also be affected early in life. You may struggle to express yourself confidently or clearly until maturity improves communication. The aspect on the 6th house works in your favor. Saturn suppresses enemies, disputes, and major obstacles, though never without effort. You tend to win challenges through persistence rather than force. Health issues, if they arise, are often manageable with disciplined routines. Over time, you develop the ability to overcome opposition quietly but effectively, especially in professional or service-related settings. Saturn's final aspect on the 9th house influences belief systems, higher education, and long-distance travel. Advanced studies such as postgraduate degrees or research-oriented education may be delayed until your mid-30s. You may question the beliefs of others and feel uncomfortable with rigid religious structures. Your relationship with faith evolves slowly, shaped by experience rather than tradition. Long-distance travel, especially for purpose rather than pleasure, becomes more significant later in life. Psychologically, Saturn in the 12th house represents karmic clearing. You may carry fears or guilt that do not clearly belong to your present life circumstances. These patterns surface so they can be understood and released. If ignored, they can manifest as anxiety, unhealthy coping habits, or emotional withdrawal. If faced consciously, they become sources of immense inner strength. You also carry a strong healing and communicative energy, even if you don't always recognize it. You yearn to feel connected to something larger than yourself, the collective, humanity, or a meaningful cause. While you may feel separate or isolated early on, life gradually moves you toward integration. Your sensitivity becomes a bridge rather than a barrier. Ultimately, Saturn in the 12th house shapes a life that moves from fear to awareness, from isolation to service, and from confusion to quiet wisdom. Growth is slow, inner, and demanding, but deeply transformative. You are not here to escape reality. You are here to master your inner world and through that mastery, quietly support and heal the outer one. Saturn's placement in the chart shows where life feels demanding, slow, or heavy, but also where the strongest growth eventually comes from. Saturn never denies results. It delays them until we are ready to carry responsibility without fear or illusion. Each house Saturn occupies asks for patience, discipline, and realism, and over time rewards effort with stability, wisdom, and maturity. If you recognize yourself in these patterns, remember that Saturn's lessons unfold with age. For a personalized analysis or consultation, feel free to reach out. If you found this video valuable, please like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And now you can also hype this video to boost it within the community. Your support helps this knowledge reach more people who may benefit. Thank you for watching. Stay aware, keep learning, and keep shining bright.